So, when Hurricane Juan first passed through Nova Scotia, it resulted in a complete mess, and Point Pleasant Park was one of the places that was damaged. This affected a lot of people who used the park, and it really affected the Mi'kmaq Nation because the Mi'kmaws used Point Pleasant Park as a traditional gathering place. It was also known to be a burial site and also used for spiritual connections and also used for the Mi'kmaq Spring Feast, and it is also where they had first interacted with French settlers. Now, a complication with the study of the resolution or regeneration of the woods in Point Pleasant Park is that it's a mix of soft and mixed wood, so it's an Acadian forest. And where secondary succession would happen, not only is time a complication in the restoration of Point Pleasant Park, but also what is going to be restored. What kind of species, what kind of plants, and what kind of trees are going to come up after Hurricane Juan. And so some objectives that we decided to cover today kind of cover how Point Pleasant Park as a whole and in parts were affected by Hurricane Juan. So, and by doing this, we essentially decided to look at how the overall forest community changed over time, the density of the dominant species from 2004 to 2025, and how that changed over time, as well as the chosen community metric and how that changed over time and why it did. And looking at all those three questions, we're looking at how we can predict that it'll change in the future. And so some hypothesis that we've looked into is that secondary succession results in the increase of overall forest community, and it'll also result in no change in ratio from the dominant species in 2004 to 2025, and that each community metric, whatever one that we choose, is going to increase.
There were three main questions going into this experiment, being how has the overall forest community changed over time, how has the density of the dominant species in 2004 as well as the dominant species in 2024 changed over time. Our hypotheses for the main three research questions were as following. For research question 1, total species density will increase following Hurricane Juan in 2004, creating increased crowding in the overall forest community as it moves towards a climax community. For research question 2, as the community moves towards the climax community, the ratio of red spruce and maple will stay constant. And for research question 3, over time, species richness will increase as the forest community continues to recover from the effects caused by Hurricane Juan.
Point Pleasant Park's forest canopy was uprooted and damaged due to the high wind speeds produced by Hurricane Juan. Shown in Figure 1 are the 6 study sites selected during a survey of the park's forest. These specific sites were chosen based on the severity of conflicted damage on the forest structure, with the total area of each site being 400 square meters. The study began in 2004 and continues to run to the present day. Some years are excluded from the study due to other hurricanes and the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, no data was collected. Ecology students during the fall semester went to Point Pleasant Park to gather data at their specific site. Data collection occurred during the end of October to early November. The size of the trees were measured using measuring tapes and the technique of diameter breast height, DBH. This is a standard unit of measure and practiced by the logging industry. Only living trees with a minimum diameter of 2.5 centimeters were included. The tree density was also surveyed at each site, which is the number of trees belonging to each species. Data from tree density and diameter breast height, DBH, can be processed and turned into graphs that compare diversity over time and density over time. The results are analyzed further, using linear regression formulas to determine the presence of a correlation as well as the strength of a relationship between these variables. These outcomes help evaluate the estimated effect Hurricane Juan had on Point Pleasant Park's forest community. We will be focusing on the results from total density, red spruce density, red maple density, and species richness, to explain how much influence these factors have on the forest succession.
As a recap, the first research question is, how has the overall forest community changed over time? What can we predict will happen to the overall community as the forest moves towards its climax community? And here are the results of that. What we understand from this graph here is that over time, the density of the community has grown linearly, leading to much more trees within the 400 meter square range in the later years after the impacts of Hurricane Juan. Why did this happen? Since Hurricane Juan ruined most of the Point Pleasant Park area, there's not a lot of plants still inhabiting it, leading to low predation and competition, meaning a lot more plants can root and thrive in this environment. What we can predict in the future is that as the forest moves towards its climax community, the density graph will begin to plateau, eventually leading to an equilibrium of trees, meaning that it can sustain the population in that environment. As we can see, around the 2004 range, there was a density of about 0. And in 2025, we can see there's about 250, which is a big difference.
So for research question 2 results, again, research question 2 was looking at how the density of dominant species in 2004 changed to 2025, why it did, and how we can also use this information to predict how it'll change as it moves towards its climax community. As you can see, the linear regression of the red spruce and the red maple was conducted because we wanted to see the relationship between the red spruce and red maple richness compared to the years from 2024 to 2025. And this is excluding years such as 2005, 2007, 2016, and 2020 due to various reasons, like hurricanes, pandemics. We just couldn't get data off of them. But the data that was collected, we were able to get this and gather this data, basically the years that we could. The Point Pleasant Park, there were about 4 to 6 different sites all over the park that different lab groups went out and gathered the data. The sites were split into 4 different quadrants, 4 equal-sized quadrants. And from there, any tree that was greater than 2.5 centimeters at DBH height, or at DBH, I guess, was recorded and inserted into the data. So where DBH was 4.5 meters, if the diameter was bigger than 2.5 or greater, it was recorded and then kept and then logged into graphs and tables as such. And so, as you can see in figures 2 and figure 3, the density of the red spruce and the red maple had actually increased from just below 5 to around 25. And in figure 3 and both figure 2, you can see that it actually increases to just a bit more than 25, 400 meters squared. And you can even see in just after 2015 how there was a surge of richness as well. So as you can see that there was in fact an increase of dominant species from 2004 to 2025. And so what about this? What about these results? So the results show, again, that there was, in fact, an increase of the dominant species red spruce and red maple from 2004 to 2025. Also, looking at the R-squared, you can see that they are both positive numbers, and that when you insert that into the data, you can predict that it'll also increase the density for these dominant species as you go forward into the future and as it starts to get closer to the climax community.
Figure 4 illustrates how species richness is increased during the study. Using linear regression, the overall length between species richness and time was examined. The results produced an R-squared value of 0.58, indicating that 58% of the variability in species richness is correlated with time. In addition, a p-value of less than 0.05 was calculated. Therefore, it can be concluded that these results are statistically significant, and there is a strong positive connection between this measurement of diversity with respect to time. As well, an increase in species richness following a disturbance, which is displayed by the dotted trend line in Figure 4, aligns with the successional theory's projected path that richness will increase as the developing community makes use of newly available resources. Therefore, based on these pieces of evidence, I can predict that species richness in Point Pleasant Park will continue to increase, moving towards its climax community. Additionally, Figure 5 is a proposed model of forest ecosystem recovery following a disturbance. Focusing on Phase 2, labeled aggradation, there is a significant increase in biomass during this phase of recovery. Comparing the dotted trend line in Figure 4 to the slope of the line in Figure 5, there are obvious similarities, which could place Point Pleasant Park's recovery somewhere in Phase 2. As well, an increase in abundance of trees in Point Pleasant Park is equivalent to an increase in biomass. I can conclude that the increase in species richness signifies a more diverse environment. Comparing now with the changes in Point Pleasant Park's forest community, being consistent with the trends described and the successional theory, this indicates that as the forest moves towards its climax community, it is in simultaneous recovery. My findings partially support my original hypothesis that species richness will increase as the forest community recovers. However, once the forest reaches its climax community, species richness will, instead, stabilize and then fluctuate from time to time. This is shown in Figure 5 during the final phases.
So, in conclusion, Point Pleasant Park is currently at a mid-successional stage. Looking into the article called Forest Ecosystems of Point Pleasant Park by Lilly in 2004, they state that an area that is dominated by red spruce, balsam fir, white birch, and red maple is actually a very popular trend that follows during a mid-successional stage. Also, Point Pleasant Park being an urban park actually slows down the rate of succession, and this can kind of be compared to looking at the article of the process of natural selection in urban areas by Zipperer. Basically, a study was conducted through this article where scientists went in and gathered data from the wheel wells as well as footwear from people and vehicles from a popular park. And they were able to extract a large amount of seeds that had came from the wheel wells and from footwear. And so, essentially, footwear is known to be a secondary dispersal, as well as vehicles. So basically, they take the seeds and carry them further than where they're actually naturally selected to go. This can be compared to results number 2 when you look at the increase of linear regression from 2004 to 2015. Then just after 2015, there's quite a significant drop of richness, and this is because after Hurricane Matthew in 2016, there would have been a lot of vehicles and there would have been a lot of people and footwear trying to help clean up the damage. Then again, taking a lot of the seeds through secondary dispersal and removing them from the park, therefore leading to decrease in richness and diversity. And so a way that we can kind of look into enhancing our populations and restoring the Point Pleasant Park in general by looking at it through Mi'kmaq or the Mi'kmaqi way or First Nation way could be through enhancing biodiversity, where almost half of the world's endangered mammals live on protected land of indigenous people, and the rates of deforestation of land that is occupied by indigenous people have lowered. So this all results in a higher biodiversity compared to land owned by non-indigenous people. And so addressing indigenous claims, upholding existing land tenure rights, and resourcing programs on indigenous managed lands by Broom et al. 2023, this can really be a positive way to look at a better way that Point Pleasant Park can increase biodiversity and can hopefully restore to its natural way again after hurricanes.
We want to express our thanks to the fall students who went into the field and collected data each year for this study, as well as Christine Bonecamp for initiating this research project. We appreciate the work done by Allison Schmidt and Joanna Zagoras, who made the graphs and calculated the statistics used throughout the presentation. Additionally, we want to thank the Mi'kmaq people for the use of their traditional and ancestral territory. Thank you.
All of our references are in CSE format as indicated in the assignment for Forest Ecology Research Presentation Guidelines and Instructions.